Turning to rugby now, and Alan Quinlan is on the line. Good morning to you, Quinny.
Morning, lads. How are you?
Good. We had a bit of an agenda stuff to speak about. Then we got sidetracked at the top of the show talking about Mack Hansen and me being impressed with him at the seeing him twice at the Aviva over the last couple of months, twice for Connacht, being very impressed with him again. He's obviously doing his stuff for Ireland. I'm wondering aloud as to whether he should make the trip at some point south. That maybe a fit with Munster would be a good career move for him.
Well, he's good enough to play with any of the provinces, I think. He's been brilliant. I've been really impressed with him myself. I think he's not just a good footballer, but an intelligent rugby player as well. And he has that ambition to attack, and someone who, if you go and watch him, you're excited by what he wants to try and do in a game. And he's done brilliant. He'd be certainly a nice fit, but you have to be very careful here. You get in trouble with all the Connacht.
Well, I was going to ask you, are we still? I look at Owen has been stirring them up earlier on one way or the other, despite there was no slide coming from my direction. But are we still in a position on that point of the best players leaving Connacht?
I don't know. I think it's a crucial. It's a crucial situation for them coming up this year. If they don't make the playoffs or they don't make Europe, it probably starts that debate again, doesn't it? That the possibility of players looking outside of Connacht, particularly if they're young players and they've got some elevation and attention from other clubs. But I think it's the last thing. It's the last thing that Andy Friend or anyone in Connacht would want to hear, that players are starting to think that way. But the reality is, bar 2016, what they did in the Pro 14 at the time, which was phenomenal. They've got to be in the mix for competitions and at the latter stages. And unfortunately, this year is probably going to peter out for them. So you're always going to be vulnerable and open to other clubs picking off some of your best players. So, if I was a Connacht player and Leinster came knocking, like what happened with Robbie Henshaw or Munster, you're gonna think about it. But I think they're building something which is really important, and that's the draw. I think the atmosphere is really good. Some very good young coaches in there with Andy Friend as well, and but I think pre-season can come quick enough for them. I know they'll try and finish in a high and go to South Africa and win their games there, but if they don't make Europe and don't make the playoffs, then it'll end up being a very disappointing season for them.
Into round 4 of the Six Nations on Sunday, and it's England at Welford Road, and the fixture that drives fear, I suppose, into the coaches and management ahead of the game. The toughest game of the championship. Number 1 team in the world. They're ruthless. They're skillful. It's a bit of a hiding to nothing, isn't it?
Excuse me. Yeah. Yes, it is. It's a very difficult situation because they're not going to openly say that they're going to lose the game, but that's the reality unless something extraordinary happens. It's a very difficult situation, and you've got to try and block that out as a team. They've got to find some sort of performance themselves. I think obviously there was a lot of improvements against Italy, but Italy are different prospects. England have scored 31 tries in the first 3 games, which spells big trouble for Ireland on Sunday because they've been so powerful, aggressive, and probably ruthless is the word, Adrian. They've been putting teams away. They have, I think it's 21 tests in a row they've won now, or 22 tests in a row. They've not lost in a couple of years. So they're very, very ruthless in their approach to all these games. And if you look at the first 3 results, they've put 57 points on Scotland, 74 on Italy, and 58 on Wales. So they're big scorelines. So that's where we're at on Sunday. Welford Road brings back good memories for me. I was talking to Niamh Briggs about it during the week, and it's a great place to play. There's going to be a big crowd there for them on Sunday, but all they can do, you can't really. Of course, they'll have to analyse the English side and see and look at their strengths and know their players inside out, all their individuals, and that's part and parcel of your analysis. But they've got to try and focus on themselves, and when they have the ball themselves, what they do, how they manage the set piece battle. England have been very, very dominant there, scrum and line out against teams. Their maul has been very powerful as well. So it's a tough ask for them, but a great challenge as well. It's a great challenge for them, and for them to try and just focus on themselves is probably the key. It sounds very obvious, but they've got to make sure that if they get a couple of opportunities, that they try and take them and really test themselves physically, because this is kind of the top of the game, isn't it? This is the very, very top here where England are at. And, if the Irish team are aspiring to grow and get stronger, well, they're going up front and up close and personal with probably the best team in the world.
It's surely not a sustainable situation where Ireland lose their best backs regularly for massive games. If they're going to have any chance of beating England over the next little while, they're going to need their best players available in all positions, and this isn't the first time that obviously sevens have needed players, and obviously it's something that the RFU will say is that there's more money around it, and it's a more necessary requirement at the moment. But if we get into the next couple of years, Alan, what would you like to see as a solution to this situation? Is it a situation where
just more players on, and more depth, and then we all knew before the start of the competition that this was something that was going to happen. So it's difficult for Ireland when they're losing a couple of players to the sevens again. But I think there's nothing you can do about it now. I think it's about more depth and strengthening both sevens and 15s, that there's enough of players there. Some, of course, will cross over at times and that will continue to happen. But the more depth you have, and that's part of the review process and the report has come out, is to try and strengthen both sevens and 15s. But it's certainly not ideal to lose some of your best players and your most attacking players with a trip to England.
Is the crossover sustainable, Alan? Like having to cross over players in the long term?
I don't know because it depends. It's difficult. I think you're jumping from one team to the other, different tournaments. Probably not on. Unless depends on the diary and the schedule and the fixtures and all that kind of stuff. Probably not. And I think ultimately where they want to get to is probably to have that quality and that depth in both sevens and 15s to be able to cope and not to rely on one or the other and waiting. I think it's not an ideal situation for the head coach Greg McWilliams to be in this situation, but if there's a superstar in the sevens that can play some of the 15s matches at certain times, of course that's you'd be foolish not to utilise that and go with that. But I think ultimately you want to get enough depth in both. So
there's going to be a tug of war at some point over these players if the 15s does make progress, and the report that we saw at the start of the Six Nations comes to fruition and the 15s start to make progress again. There will be a battle for some of these players, you'd suspect, even though they're run by the same organisation.
Yeah, and they've got to figure that out. I think it's a tricky situation, and I think if you, as I said, if you can get enough of players, quality players, and upskilled, and the improvements that they're trying to achieve in the women's game, that makes it lesser of a problem, if you know what I mean. But like jumping from one to the other, I think is a little bit counterproductive for the development as well. If you're the complete player who can play 15s very, very comfortably, I think it's probably easier to go. I got to be very careful here. I only played sevens once, but I would suspect it's a bit easier to go from 15s to sevens if you're a really athletic, quick, skillful player. Someone like Mack Hansen that we're talking about, he's a brilliant 15s player. I think he could slip over to sevens and be outstanding at it. But the other way, I think, because of the set piece stuff, the breakdown challenges that you have, it's probably a bit more trickier. But look, it's something they've got to try and figure out. And I think one way, without making it, telling anybody what to do, I think is if you have more players, then it eases that burden a little bit of having to use both.
We better get a quick word on Munster before we let you away. Sometimes a bit of a lull after the Heineken Cup games can set in, but a lot on the line in Belfast tonight.
There is a lot on the line, and I think, for Ulster, it's a kind of a tricky situation for them because of losing last week, and there's maybe a narrative there that they'll be badly hurt and it'll be hard to pick themselves up. I think there's no better way than getting rid of a really disappointing loss and a heartbreaking loss than beating one of your biggest rivals the week after. So there'll be an incredible determination from Ulster to beat Munster at home. I don't think they've lost 3 games in a row since it's a good number of years since they've lost 3 games in a row in the league. They lost last week in Europe, but they lost their 2 games to South Africa as well. So they'll be very, very determined to bounce back. There's no Dwayne Vermeulen. I've said this in the last couple of weeks. They've signed him for big European games. That's where, and I think he was outstanding in Toulouse and brilliant last week. His whole presence is just phenomenal, and I think he's brought them another level. And I think the competition and the way they've competed has been very impressive, because they've limped out of Europe a few times, whereas this time they were very, very unlucky. So what Dan McFarlane has done has been really impressive. Some mistakes in that game last week just cost him. But for Munster, they're down to the bare bones, aren't they, really, with I was just thinking, wouldn't you love to be going to Belfast now with Gavin Coombs and Tyburn, Andrew Conway, Dave Kilcoyne? And I think that, having those guys even back this week would be a huge boost for Munster. But, Peter O'Mahony and Zebo are gone out of the team now, whatever kind of knocks they picked up. It's a very, very tough game for Munster, and they sit 4th on 47 points. Very realistically, if they lose, well, it's a reality. If they lose tonight, they could easily be down to 7th or 8th. Edinburgh are on 7th on 44 points, and they have a home game, or they're playing Benetton this weekend, I think, and it's the Sharks, the Stormers, the Bulls, they all have home games as well. So I think it's a situation that Munster very, very obviously need to win this game. Edinburgh have Zebra at home, so they're going to win that. So they're going to kind of probably get 5 points and jump up to 49. The Stormers, depends what the Sharks do against Leinster, but the Stormers play Glasgow at home as well. So the South African teams, it's incredible. They're going to be in the playoffs, and there are probably 3 of them going to be in Europe next year. So Munster's games that they've left are against home to Cardiff and away to Leinster. So with 3 games left, I think they have to win 2 games to make sure that not alone are they in the playoffs, but to be in with any chance of having a home quarter final, which is a tall order at this stage. But it's a very tough game for them, and as I said, both sides will be desperate to win this game tonight.
Yeah, and Ulster especially so after what happened last weekend. Quinny, thanks a million. Enjoy the games.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.
On the line there, the Red 78 podcast, by the way, a reminder about that. You can check it out. You mentioned about talking to Niamh Briggs, the 2 of them chatting all things Munster, the Red 78 podcast.